So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about the jewel in the lotus, the radiance of the Bodhisattva, and the dance of the Darkini. And I've got 20 minutes. You could shorten that into shorthand. I'm going to talk about love, responsibility, and spiritual friendship. So I'm going to start off by telling you an experience I had some time ago. It was in December in the year 2002. I was living at Margimaloka, and I went on a solitary retreat in North Wales, somewhere northeast of Snowdonia. I was in the Snowdonia National Park, more or less. And I hired a small cottage for, I think it was a 2-week retreat. I can't quite remember now. It was probably 10 days or 2 weeks. And someone dropped me off. It was middle of winter. It was a bit dark. I arrived at this house, and then almost immediately I realised it was unsuitable for a meditation solitary retreat. And being winter and I was a bit tired, I just really felt, well, I have to make the most of this. It's too much trouble moving, trying to find somewhere else to go. So, cut a long story short, I spent virtually the whole of that time practicing mindfulness. I'd just been introduced to the idea of mindfulness through my friend Vidyamala, who is exploring mindfulness as a kind of healthcare intervention, a way of living well with pain and illness, because she's got chronic severe pain all the time in her back. And well, I knew quite a bit about mindfulness because I'd been an order member for a couple of decades by this time. And I think my idea was that I wanted to train myself so that I knew exactly what was going on in my mind. So I knew what I was thinking, I knew what I was feeling, and so on. I think I was more interested in actually freeing myself from the prison of my thoughts. So what I did is I got up in the mornings, and before all the cars and lorries started rumbling by, I'd meditate, do my sadhana practice, then I had breakfast, then I'd pack a lunch. And even though the weather sometimes it was snowing, I went out for about 4 or 5 hours walking in the forest of the Snowdonia National Park. And I just walked on different routes around for days. And during those walks, what I tried to do was just be aware of what was happening in my mind. And I remember one of the things that I'd done this before in the past as well, that I kept telling myself, you're thinking again. I was walking along, are you thinking again? You're thinking about this now, aren't you? It was as though I was like two people. You know, we got this capacity to watch our thoughts, watch ourselves thinking almost, as though there's one part of us being aware of, I'm getting angry now. You're feeling angry, but you're kind of like watching yourself getting angry. I'm reacting now. I mean, if you're really mindful, that's what you know, and then you can stop being reactive. That's kind of what mindfulness is about. Anyway, I was just kind of obsessed with my thoughts, and I kind of... and of course, at some point, something happens if you do this for long enough. If you do this for long periods of time, I pretty much guarantee something's going to happen. And it may be an upsurge of Maitri, it might be something else that happens. So I can't remember exactly when this happened in the retreat, but it was just over halfway through it. I came home one evening, and I suddenly had this realization that I was completely trapped in the prison of my thoughts, and that everything was just thoughts, just views, one view after another. It was just complete propuncture of one thing leading on to another thing, onto another thing. And I realized even the ideas I had about the spiritual life were just thoughts. Just the idea of enlightenment is another thought. Right views, another thought. Metta, another thought. And I had this experience where it was as though everything just went. It was as though, in a way similar to Yashadeva having this ideal that I was leading a spiritual life. I kind of thought it was rubbish. It was rubbish because it was just a thought. And it's, when people do question the spiritual life and what they're doing, you're just questioning your thoughts and how your feelings, and it may be because there's parts of you not integrated and you need to bring them in. Anyway, I find it amusing in a way, even though it was almost like a dark night of the soul. I kind of thinking everything I'd been doing for the last 30 years was kind of maybe a load of rubbish because it was just all thoughts and so on. And I have to say, when I was 13, I kind of worked out that you couldn't explain everything with the mind, because the mind was just only able to work with certain areas and things. And there was a faculty that we probably had that we could develop that actually would make us much more knowledgeable in a non-rational sort of way of realities, if there are realities and so on. So that was something I'd kind of worked out when I was young. And I wanted to get back to this state of just feeling that through meditation and mindfulness I could get free of thoughts. But on this day I realised you couldn't. You were just stuck with thoughts. So at that point I decided to give up the spiritual life. So I turned the TV on and I watched, actually it wasn't TV, there was some DVDs there. And I watched a really, kind of thriller. I thought, well, might as well just sit here and watch a DVD. It's as good as anything else because everything's thoughts anyway. So how do you know what thoughts are better than other thoughts? So I probably watched James Bond or something like that, which was found really boring afterwards. So I put a more serious DVD on. It was called Kim, I think, with Emma Thompson. And it was about this woman. I haven't got time to tell you the whole story. You have to go and watch it yourself if you want. Anyway, at the end of it, the thing that occurred to me was that I had to ask myself, well, what is it that really matters in my life? And of course, another part of me was saying, another thought. And it was like, it was really weird, this thing, because it was a bit like I couldn't get away from this critical faculty that just said, thoughts, another one, another one. And I, in the end, I had to kind of make a deal and say, okay, I'm going to have some thoughts now. And the Buddha talked about right thoughts, and maybe there are right thoughts, so I'm going to try and think of some right thoughts. And I asked myself, well, perhaps I should say, in this movie, what I was moved by was the character that Emma Thompson was playing, which was a professor from Oxford or Cambridge, and she was dying in a hospital in America, and she had no friends. There was no one left in her life to be there. The only person that visited her was her kind of mentor, another Don from one of those colleges who came to see her in the hospital. And the conversation went something like this. I'm sure I've got it a bit wrong, but this is how I remembered it, was that this visiting professor sat on the bed with Emma Thompson, whatever her name was in the movie. She couldn't talk by this time because the cancer was so advanced. So this visitor said, shall I read you something? Shall I read you the Ode on Death by John Donne, which was her thesis, Emma Thompson's thesis at the college. She said, no, maybe that's not going to work. How about Roger the Rabbit? I've just got this book for my grandchildren. So she opens this book and starts reading this sort of nursery rhyme, this children's thing. And I found that so moving. I'm not sure if this is factually true in the movie, but it kind of catches the mood. It was so moving that she just gave up all these sort of highfalutin ideas and just showed a little bit of kindness. But it was so small. It just seemed so limiting. And I thought, is this what you end up with when you're dying? You've just got, a few people around you. And, what about friendship? And it was at that moment I realised the most important thing in life really was friendship. That's what I cared about. I thought, what's the point of going on living? I wasn't necessarily feeling suicidal because I was just thinking, what's the point of living? And I couldn't see any point really because it was just bloody thoughts all the time, excuse my language. And there's one thought after another. And I thought, well, I've got children, they'd be upset if I wasn't around. I've got a partner, she'd probably be a bit upset too. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just go on for other people, stop them getting upset. And then it occurred to me, actually, that was really important to me. That was something I really valued. were caring about other people. And I went through a little process. It happened quite quickly, within a couple of hours, that I decided the best thing to do in my life, after having become a public preceptor, working at Padmaloka for years and years, helping lots of people to get ordained and things, the thing I needed to do really was to care about someone. So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just care. I just want to be a carer. I want to look after someone. Well, of course, I had a partner at this time. We've just been together with Vidyamala for a couple of years. And she's partially paraplegic, and she's in severe pain. She's got a lot of things, a lot of problems with her body. So I thought, well, there's someone that needs some help. Ironically, I got back to Maloka after that retreat, and it was a time when Bhante first started having sleep problems. And I was I think it was the chair at Padmaloka, and I've lived with Bhante for many years in the past. And I was one of the people that Bhante asked to sleep in his flat, not with him, but in the room next door, so that he could get some help in the night if he couldn't sleep. So I would sleep in the other room, and then there was this bell, which whenever I hear it, still kind of gives me the creeps. Ding dong, ding dong. Bhante wanted me, so I'd get out, go into his bedroom, sit by his bed, and I'd talk to him, and he'd talk to me. And it was quite moving, actually. He would tell me quite a lot of things, and then he said, okay, I think I might get back to sleep now. And so I'd leave him, I'd go next door, get into bed, I'd fall asleep sometimes straight away, and then ding dong, I'd get up. And in the morning, I thought, I've got to go back to my room in the community and get some sleep somewhere. But, I was still running the place as a public preceptor, I was involved in meetings and things. And I realised that Bhante was too big a caring situation for me. And I was really relieved when Nityabandhu and others sort of stepped in. And I kind of I segued out of that situation, and I decided to look after Vidyamala, who I thought would be a lot easier. She is a lot easier than Bhante, far less demanding. And so I've been looking after her now for the last since 2003 to today. It's 14 years, is that right? And I'm still looking after her. And she, I sometimes describe my relationship with Vidyamala not so much as a partner, but more as a co-pilot. So I like going through life with this co-pilot, and we make decisions together where to go. And I don't exactly think we ever really fell in love with each other. We talked about this the other day. We actually do care a lot about each other, but we didn't sort of have a romantic falling in love. But I like this idea that the two of us are sitting together, and we started up breathworks and did lots of things together. And all that is about caring. It's all about caring for people in chronic pain, serious problems. So that was the first thing. And more, I would say more and more so recently, I feel if there's a jewel in the lotus, it's Maitri. It's a kind of like a flame that's within us all, and it gives meaning to our life. It's what causes us to want to have contact with one another. It's the basis of friendship. It's the thing that makes us human. And that it's there in this jewel. And sometimes it's hidden with the petals of the lotus closed around it. And I think for me, this was an experience of the lotus opening up. If anything, it was for me, it was a real insight experience, actually, realising that all views were kind of ultimately meaningless. And we see lots of people having fun, having different views in the order. It's a bit like a dance. I kind of think of it as a bit like a tennis match, isn't it? Someone says this and someone says that, and it goes ding dong, ding dong. And if you're standing outside of it, it's quite fun watching it. People do get a bit worked up sometimes, but it's a bit like a game. Well, that's how I see it. And I thought, well, actually, the real thing in life is Maitri. And if you're in touch with Maitri, everything will work for you. But for me, in a way, Maitri isn't enough, and just caring for one person isn't enough. And most of my life, even as a young man, even in my early 20s, I was given lots of responsibilities. I'm fundamentally a very non-ambitious person. Subhuti's mother said of me once, when I first met her many years ago, she didn't say it to me, she said it to Subhuti, who reported it to me. She said, he's a bit aimless, isn't he? At first, I didn't quite know how to take that, and I thought, actually, it's true. But actually, I don't particularly mind what I do. I don't have, I didn't become a preceptor or a chair or something like that because I thought I wanted to do that. I wanted to be that sort of person. It was just that there was an opening. It was a bit like someone. In fact, I trained as an engineer simply because the teacher at the school I went to read out a piece of paper from a heating and ventilating company wanting to train someone to become an engineer, someone to design heating. Was anyone interested? And I went like that. And I looked around, no one else's hand was up. And that's how I became an engineer. And when I first moved here, Banti said, we need a new chair. And I said, oh, well, there aren't many options. He said, no. I said, do you want me to do it? He said, yes. And when I became a public preceptor, Subhuti said, we need some more preceptors. And I said, well, there's not many options, are there? And there was Surita, or me, and so I got given the job. And so I ended up being a public preceptor. There were just preceptors then. And I had to ordain everyone because there weren't many, there's no one else to do it. So I did a lot of that, and my life has just gone on like that. And some people, perhaps, think you ought to be ambitious, but I like the idea of being a servant. Really, I like to feel like I'm a responder. I'm really good at responding. I'm really good at responding to all the people I've ordained. Call them disciples if you want. And if they ask me, but if they don't ask me, I forget about them. Because I'm a bit aimless, right? So, like Lokavira, he comes as not like probably number one disciple, and he always calls me Guruji, so I can call him disciple. Yeah? And he's like number one disciple because he rings me up regularly and he says, "I want to talk to you." I think great. So he's such a good, and we have a really good close relationship. He's really lovely. And when people have ordained or had any contact me, I usually are very good at responding. I think I'm excellent at responding to people if they can get hold of me, which isn't always easy. So for me, in life, what I wanted to talk about really was responsibility. I had responsibility at an early age, and then I became chair and I became a preceptor and things like that. And I can't imagine a life without taking responsibility. I think it's something that men need to do, maybe women as well, but certainly men. I remember years ago Banti telling me that he thought that young men, they move from being kind of like boys, just where you're responsible for yourself, to wanting to be responsible for other people. So it was quite natural people in their late 20s then would be maybe thinking of being creating a family, because that's something you could be responsible for. And I kind of started out the other way. I already had a family when I got married when I was 21. By the age of 25, I had a child, and I had another child shortly after. So I came into the movement with a family. I had that responsibility, I had worldly responsibilities, and it was just natural for me to take responsibility. And I have to say, I can't imagine what it's like for people that don't take responsibility. It's like being a little boy all the time, just playing with your toys and just kind of caring for yourself. But when you're taking responsibility for something, it's as though you start glowing and you start affecting people around you. And it's and this is what I mean by the Bodhisattva's radiance, because I think we can all be part of the Bodhisattva. And we can all be part of that radiance if we're taking responsibility for something more than ourselves. And it's particularly difficult as you get older because you have this idea of retiring. So I'm going to be 70 next year, and I've been thinking I ought to retire. So I've given up most of my responsibilities. I'm now thinking about maybe that was a phase, and I'm going to move into another phase and take some other responsibilities on. So I'm already designing things that I'm going to be responsible for more other people to do. But I'm kind of letting things emerge and seeing what happens, because I'm aimless. I haven't got a goal in mind. But I think you can't really take the Bodhisattva ideal or as a vision seriously unless you're prepared to actually step up and take responsibility for other people. And I find it wonderful to be able to just say every morning, I vow to save all beings, I vow to extinguish all passions, I vow to master all dharmas, and I vow to attain the incomparable Buddha truth. And it just reminds me that that's what I'm responsible for as an order member, that it's for the benefit of all beings that I'm an order member. Sometimes I ask people when they tell me mitras, and they tell me they're ready for ordination, and they ask me what they might get from the order. I sometimes turn it round and say, what are you going to give to the order? Because I'm not sure if I want to ordain you if I don't see much. And I think it's a very positive way of looking at ordination. What have you brought to the order? And what are you giving the order? Because you're part of a community, a part of an association of like-minded individuals, and you have a responsibility to give something to the rest of us. So it's maybe something you could reflect on when you're meditating. What are you giving the order as an order member? And so I just would like to make say that I can't really imagine how you can live the spiritual life unless you take responsibility for something more than your own little happiness. And I'm sure that's what you're all doing anyway. But it may be a message you'd like to pass on to others who want to join the order. And lastly, the Dance of the Darkinis. This is something that stuck in my mind from a talk or a paper that Deva Mitra wrote many, many, many years ago about spiritual friendship. He said when people communicate, spiritual friends communicate, it's like the Dance of the Darkinis. There's something comes into being that's it's like a dance, and it's kind of spiritual, and it's kind of magical. And I thought this was such a much more evocative description of Kalyana Mitrata, the Dance of the Darkinis. So when I meet Lokavira, it really feels like we're having a dance somehow together. Sometimes we're just joking around and things, and Yashadeva as well. I used to love going to Guhyaloka, and he'd come down to see me, and it was just like, yes, it was really so happy. And when other people outside the order see that, they're just attracted to the order. That's what they want to. That's what they want. They want to be part of that dance with you. I'll tell you something else, Bhante, you told me. In the past, I can't remember if he still does it, whether it was recent or how long ago. He used to listen to Women's Hour on Radio 4. Do you know Radio 4 has a Woman's Hour every morning at 10 o'clock? And yesterday morning, I was coming here. I had to drop my car off at my sister's at Wellingborough, which is halfway over here, and Lokavira picked me up. And on the way over there, I listened to Woman's Hour. And there was a little item in there. It's quite interesting, Women's Hour. It's always good to keep check on what women are doing, and the next bit of legislation that's likely to come about. But this was about a book someone wrote about friendship, and the thing that really struck me from the interview was that the woman said, first of all, friendship between she said. She felt a bit sorry for men because they didn't seem to have such capacity to form really close friends with one another that weren't sort of non-sexual or non-romantic, just like two girls having really close friends and things. She described it and things. But she said, and this is the thing that stuck to me, was that in order to have friendship, you have to work at it. You really have to work at it. And I've been thinking about this for quite a while, really. Why? We talk a lot about spiritual friendship in the movement. And I know a lot of people, and I feel friendly towards a lot of people. But I've been thinking, how many of those people do I actually have a really close friendship with? I live with my co-pilot, and I have a very close friendship with her. I don't go somewhere without kind of telling her what I'm thinking of doing. She's very supportive. She encourages me to do it usually. If it seems a little bit like I'm wasting my time, she'll question me and things like that. And I think quite often people end up in a romantic situation because we were all looking for that kind of co-pilot or that kind of partnership, we call it. I don't like this word partnership because I'm also a business partner with my partner. So but the idea of having like intimate friends where you can just be with them, you can tell them about yourself and so on, is much more secure. And this was one of the points this woman made. She said, when you form a romantic relationship, the chances of it surviving are against you. The chances are against you. Most people divorce and separate. But when you've got real friends that are not based on that kind of contractual basis, they're much more likely to survive. And I think we all know this as order members. We know about spiritual friendship and so on. But do we work at it? And how many people could you really make your close friends of? I can't imagine it being more than maximum of 5, really. I mean, that would be pushing things. 2, maybe. Where you're actually in really regular contact with people, you have you have the joy of expressing your love and care for them constantly over years and years, and they do the same to you. What a wonderful situation if you had 2 or 3 people like that who were like your wives or husbands or whatever you want to call them. Had that really close, like family, strong connection with people. And it seemed to me actually, maybe I've been a bit lazy, maybe other people are, I don't know. But I certainly haven't worked at my friendships hard enough because I'm a bit aimless. And it's something I'm really beginning to think about as I get into the last part of my life. Hopefully I'm going to have another 30 years because my dad's 100, so maybe I'll go on a bit longer. But it's something I think it's a wonderful thing to do. And it really is like a dance. I think work isn't really the right idea. I like to think of it as doing like salsa together. I'm thinking of going to salsa lessons because I just like the idea of dancing. And I'd like to think of like getting close. Maybe I can get Tulka Lokavira into going to salsa classes with me. And when he moves to Cheltenham, we can just go and dance together. We probably don't need to because we do crazy things anyway. But I think that's would make your life, the radiance of you as a bodhisattva, shine more and more fully, because within you have the jewel of Maitri, and you have the responsibility, which is a natural human urge to share it with other people, but you do have to get off your backside sometimes and make an effort.